This is the introduction lecture for the logo design project in the ART161 graphic design course. So for this project, you are going to be creating your own logo based on a company that you create. And when we think about logos, we want to think about what makes a good logo and what makes a poor logo. And I think really what most of us can agree on is there is generally generic logos in the world that we easily forget. And then there are really outstanding logos that we'll always be able to recognize, even without the brand's name attached. But what is it about a logo that makes you recognize it? What is it about the design that can create that memory or that specific emotion that we have as consumers? So when we think about some of these logos that have been around for a long time and that are very easily recognizable, this didn't happen overnight, right? This is something that is built over time. And really, when we think about a logo is just a mark to help represent a company. What we think about when we see these two logos, the Nike logo and the Apple logo, we recognize these without any additional typography, and that's really due to all of the additional elements that have come into the branding and the marketing for these brands and our experience. When these brands were first launched, or these logos were first launched for the brands, they didn't have that initial reaction to viewers. That was built over time. So sometimes it's helpful to think about taking some of the pressure off of yourself while creating these logos and really trying to think about what makes an effective mark. And most of the time that comes down to this idea of simplicity. Something that is simple enough to work on a small scale. So think about something like maybe your Instagram icon that is typically pretty small, or something on a larger scale. Maybe there's some sort of billboard that's being used, or some sort of wrap on a building or billboard that would be rather large and kind of show all the details of this mark. So it really comes down to versatility when we think about a mark. And we also want to think about what is the function behind a logo. And that goes far beyond just being some sort of nice or pretty visual. It's really the heart of your branding efforts. So your logo should represent the essence of your company's personality. And while a logo may seem quite simple to create, designing one that is really well organized and well representative of your company is not always easy. It really involves a lot of market research. It involves a strong knowledge of your buyers' personas, meaning the people who are your intended audience for that brand, and a thoughtful consideration of the principles of logo design. So often designers find themselves creating a lot of iterations of a single logo before they get the one that they think is just right. So how can we start a project like this? Well, we need to start with the brand, and you need to start with some research. So coming up with the company name and the concept and the demographic is really important for this project. You want to establish a product or a service and what the company will be used for. Sometimes it's helpful to even use a thesaurus and enter in a term that best describes your product into the search bar for some sort of unique ideas as far as names go that relate back to your brand. You also want to think about how you can establish your story. So before you even think about what this logo will look like, take some time asking yourself, what is the story behind your company? Take, for example, when we look at Coca-Cola's logo, we don't see a brown carbonated beverage within the logo. We think about these polar bears from the iconic commercials, or this thick white script letters that are being used to kind of show the heritage of that brand. And then you want to start to think about finding the why. So step out of what your company does, right? Coca-Cola makes a beverage, right? A carbonated beverage. But again, that's not necessarily present in the logo. You want to think about the why. What is the root of your story? And that should come through within the different colors that you use, the shapes and the elements, and the typeface of your logo. If your logo were the title of a movie, what would it look like, right? So again, going back to the Coca-Cola logo, they use the white script. And again, this ties in some elements of heritage. This company has been around for a long time, and they want to project this idea that it is a friendly company that shows that time that they have spent within the overall market. So once you have started to explore some research and maybe collect some ideas, and you start to think about what the name of that company would be, then you want to start to work on your creative brief worksheet for this assignment. And that can be found in the modules. And that is going to ask you to enter in the project summary, your audience profile, the perception, the tone, and the guidelines, the communication strategy, the competitive positioning, and your targeted message. Once you have completed that worksheet and answered those questions to the best of your ability, that is when you can start to think about exploring some ideas. And sometimes it's helpful to create a mind map. So sometimes it's helpful to think about these descriptive words or qualities or traits that are related to your company. Begin to describe not only what you do, but the why from that previous step. So this is an example from a previous student here, and they wanted to create a water company called Vero. And we can see that we have all of these kind of ideas of what this company is related to, right? Thinking about something that is chic, modern, new, and fancy, something that is practical and clean, relating it to nature with a leaf or a branch, potentially even tying in the actual product itself, which is water. And that has this idea of being transparent or blue, potentially flowing. Again, tying in these elements of natural qualities. So all of these aren't necessarily going to make their way into your mark, but if you can explore different ideas, different concepts, and even just really words that relate back to your product, sometimes it will help you to not only come up with the name of your company, but to start to think about what the logo is going to be able to utilize in order to really express that why of the company. Then once you have some of that information collected, you can start to sketch some ideas based on your research. So now that you're armed with the why and a few keywords for direction, start to work with pencil and paper and sketch out every idea that comes into your head. Now, these are not intended to be insanely polished sketches. I would rather you have a lot of rough sketches versus just a few extremely detailed sketches. And this is a better way to present to clients often as well. It is helpful to really see a broad spectrum of ideas and then start to pick and choose those ideas that are working best before you start to get too far or spend too much time on one single mark. And that allows for each new concept to evolve on its own. So try not to get frustrated in the beginning. Think about those first few as just something to kind of put on the page and kind of get your creative juices flowing. And from there, keep refining that. Use some of your previous sketches to influence the outcomes of new ones. Maybe there's some element that you like in a previous sketch that you want to flesh out a little bit further or potentially adapt in a new way. That's okay. That can be a new idea that might end up being stronger than that original concept that you have come up with. But it's also important to create variety. Again, think about how this is going to work in the real world. When you're presenting these ideas to a client, you want to have a broad idea, or excuse me, a broad variation of ideas that you can present to them. So try not to just stick in one area or one idea. Try to really flesh out multiple different ideas and go back to your word list, go back to the why as far as what your company is. You might focus on these sketches as far as the shape, the name of your brand, or even both. And this can be tricky, but it's also a very rewarding process. When you start to sketch, you think about the audience that you are creating the work for, what service the business provides, and if there's any imagery related to that service. Look at how the illustration and the typography could fit together or potentially even be one. And don't expect to solve the brief right away, but rather allow your mind to create freely and see where your creativity takes you. So these are some examples of different sketches from previous students. And you can see that there's a wide variety of ideas in each one of these groups of sketches, right? Maybe there's some sort of general concept, maybe there's some sort of general idea, but it's being fleshed out in multiple ways and multiple interpretations of how that could be presented. It's also important to think about, whether you want your logo to be a mark or a word mark, which would involve the typography or the name of the product, or potentially a combination mark, which would be both. So let's explore some of these types of logos. There are multiple styles of logos or types of logos that we see in the world. The first one would be the word mark. The second is the letter mark or monogram. We have symbols or pictorial logos, combination marks, and then emblems and crests, just to name a few. So word mark is going to be something like the Coca-Cola logo, which we've been talking about already, right? That has the name of the company in the logo itself. And as we can see, there are other examples on this page as well. We have Braun and Facebook and FedEx and NASA. The actual logo is the name of the company. And it's in most of these cases, we can see that they are taking some liberties to customize the typeface or make some changes to this typeface to go back to that why of what this company is. But we are able to integrate that all into one single element here. Another option is a letter mark or a monogram. And this often takes maybe the first letter of whatever the company's name is, right? Whether it's Yahoo with the Y, or Uber down here with the U, or Airbnb, or Westington House. Motorola up at the top left, which is a little bit more of an obscured M, but still kind of represents the M shape within the space there. We have the symbol mark, which is going to be sometimes thought of as the most interesting within logos because they are sometimes kind of abstract, like we can see in the top left-hand corner here or the top right-hand corner. Other times they come up with creative solutions to integrate elements within the company. So in the top center here, we can see the logo for the Time Warner Company, which is a television company. And you may just look at this as some sort of concentric lines that are moving from the center. But in actuality, they're representing an eye, an eyeball with the sort of pupil in the center, and an ear. And that is intended to represent what it is that we experience when we watch television. We watch and listen to television. So within that symbol, they're able to communicate an aspect of that brand. Now, a combination mark is going to be a grouping of a mark and typography that relates back to the brand. So again, think about companies like Nike or Adidas, North Face, Lacoste, or even Adobe. Sometimes these are very versatile logos because, as we know, we can separate different elements of these. Nike is a great example of that. The Nike swoosh, as we talked about in the beginning of this lecture, is recognizable without the typography even accompanied with that. And again, that has to do with the idea that we have seen this over and over again, and we know that that is the Nike brand. Obviously, if you were to create a new company and start to separate those, it's not going to have that same recognition. And that's where it comes into the branding and the recognition of that brand. But it creates a lot of versatility, right? You can think even about the Lacoste logo, which uses the alligator. And we think about that alligator as sort of that little crest or that emblem that's on a lot of the polo shirts. They don't necessarily have the Lacoste typography there, but again, we can recognize that. There's also the emblem or the crest. This is typically going to be something that is put in some sort of shape, right? So whether it's a circular shape, more of an organic shape, or a rectangular shape, we have all of the typography and all of the elements put within this larger sort of shape or crest. And a lot of times I typically think about car manufacturers for this, like BMW or Mercedes or many other car companies out there, but that goes beyond that as well. You know, we can see UPS in here and Converse shoes, the NHL logo. These are all emblems or crests that are put within some sort of shape. So this week's task is to complete the creative brief worksheet, to work on your mind map based on the creative brief information that you have collected, exploring different words and ideas that are representative of the why of your company, and then beginning to create 12 thumbnail sketches that are either analog, meaning hand-drawn, or digital. So that is a good place to get started for this week. If there are any questions, please reach out.